Hmong shamanism it's similar to animism where there's a spiritual life where everything has a spiritual force to it, whether it's rock, river, trees, even cars and phones and refrigerators, all of those things. We believe that it has its own spiritual essence. And so I think shamanism in Hmong culture, I'll break it down a little bit for us too. What is Qhua, right? When people mistaking it, and there is through the mistake and through there's judgment and there's biases that Qhua sounds like but there's a key difference between Qhua and Qhua. We say Qhua because it was believed that when Shiyi defeated, when there was evil in the world, and she was the first shaman who came and was able to destroy all the evil and vanquish it. The evil spirits, Qhua Shiyi, right there, Shiyi, you are a healer. Shiyi, you have brought balance. God, your Geitai is not just law, right? Geitai is a practice. God, your Geitai, yang evil, bring balance. Because spirits and humans, we still live so intertwinedly. And so then, like that, and so it is the spiritual praise of the spiritual balance. So I think shamanism itself is just being in tune with the spiritual life around you and with life around you in general, and just keeping that balance. Like we don't worship anything, we don't because we're all about balancing, make sure there's that spiritual balance, and we'll have good health and wealth and everything. So the norma young and so a lot of the stories, right? And I'm going to talk a little Hmong just because it's easier to speak in Hmong. Actually, how Nang is Danang clear you or Nang Danang jaw you young Nang, so they'll teach you a chant, they'll teach you to shake, and it's guiding you, and it's more of like they you feel it, you feel how the chants go, and that's how you learn how to sing it. And so but then to have a strong understanding of Hmong shamanism, you have to, as a Zinan, you take it and you find the time, and you have to research and really read and learn about the Hmong cosmos. So like the world creation, Duji Deito. And until you understand the Danengs, you understand a big group of the Danengs, you understand how did these Danengs play in our cosmos, then you'll start understanding a little bit of how Onang works as well, because Onang it uses folklore characters, right? For example, it's your Onang nama delhu nian gong chua zito na la zhe bei go mo chua, and so that's a certain Onang nian gong chua zito na. But nian gong chua zito na is also the god and goddess of beauty. And so then you understand that in the dynamic of how those folklores affect how we practice, right? One other example is how we learn about Shiyi is really going, and there's so many different variations of the Shiyi story. So got the a lot of different people, and you have to a lot of the variations. Because although, people ask, well, which one is the most effective? Because every story is a little different, but it kind of follows the same path. Mm-hmm. But then once you understand data, you realize that, certain Hmong groups practice differently, and their practice, right? They actually like how they celebrate it's a little different depending on the Danings they grew up with. And so that's why I say it's very important to always expand your perspective, so you understand how to culture from families. And the best way to learn it is just or there's YouTube. YouTube is always a great resource too. And so that's really what I did. My biggest thing was just I would say, some might know we always just like it's a term that right? So it's like our most basic. And that one would be or And it's so I know there's different names, right? It's yeah, ita janju, ita koche, is that what the difference? And it's just depending on the term you like to use, but it's very similar. It's pretty much the same. Có mu janju, mu koi chen nang la gu ying janju either way. And so that's probably the most basic one and the most requested. And it's usually for people who nothing too big, or sometimes like surgery low, and many very reasons. Never 1 week in a row. It's always the same. Maybe they're traveling, or maybe they're what is it? Then that's the most basic one that I actually perform. And so then, but within that, I just like to also like add that in, like you get multiple blessings. You actually get multiple things. Because the Tanang Janchu, which is the one I perform usually in a weekend basis. There won't be 1 week and I wouldn't do that if my active season. Being being cleanse the house, sweep it, we spiritually wash it, and we raise your guardians, we give them weapons to protect the house, and we do all of that, so you get multiple blessings. And even though we say Janju, and there's all these other blessings we do, and so that would be the most common that I perform. When someone requests, they'll tell you why something is happening. So most times, people do go nang shai on tailor. They go call, and so that happens. So most times we already know, just because the process, right? They actually will have you on nang shai. And if your die go shai and if the person actually feels better and actually gets better, then it is said that your got some Hmong and it's your energy or your presence that can actually heal them. And so then talk on. So most times most of my onangs are like this. But sometimes people will just ask me, and as a shaman, then you just take your own time to make sure that before and see like and that's just because, let's say then what you use will be different, the steps you take will be a little different, so these you have to take into consideration. Depends too. Sometimes people will have me, they always say go into people's house, but in America here it's so hard, and I'm always never home, and so most times I do just do it at home. Some people will come over if they're insistent. So if you're and they're like, let's say they're going, they have an illness that's like untreatable, they're having surgery, or or anything, they usually come over. And also it's like a sign of respect of like our person is in a state of urgency, so we'll be there for yours as well. But most times it's just me myself at home. As a shy nama, there's so many different ways to shy. So I'll just kind of summarize the two main that I do. Not the two, but the main ways that I do. And so sometimes I do that. I'm not the best at that, honestly, and so I try not to do that because I want to be as accurate as possible. And then you can do itanang shaikia, where you do a whole ceremony, and that is the exact same as onang kaya. If you're going into that trance, and I always tell people, to go onang ka, you still actually shy, you still actually shy. You'll get there. And so let's say kutu shai ko ta na, got la to talk kutu ka na ya, kutu zao rồi kutu shai ta no eat a lot, kutu chỉ cũng ya cho cá shai lửa đó thế. And just as you always make sure that you want to make sure you're doing everything correctly. So you always shine, and so it's and then but most times at home, because when to be personally, I usually only onang around like midnight or 1 a.m. and that's not because I like to onang. I'm usually my days usually filled up, and so usually I don't find time until later. I don't have spotters, or I don't have people assisting me, right? And so you can't actually and so we do something called Qhua, And Qhua is a lifesaver because all you do is you just you put the veil on and you hold the horn in one hand and you just hit the gong and you chant, right? You just chant. But instead of us going, because if I was to get on the bench and do the ceremony, that's me going, right? But instead of because I don't have assistance and I can't go, I hit the gong, and the whole time I'll just hit the gong because I'll tell the horn to go look into it and come back and tell me what you saw. And so then that is also the most common way that we do, just to save time. We actually break down the soul and the spirit into many parts. And so the anatomy of the whole spirit and the soul, you hear the word Billy Tou, and one that people actually, there's this cognition that the word Shiyi is very, negative and evil, but Shiyi is actually the soul itself. So the Shiyi is the soul. And so how I like to break down for people to understand, it's like, you break down from cells to tissue to organs itself, or the body. And so the bli, the bli itself is minor parts of fragments of the souls. And so blis together make up Yonju, make up Dunju, and then all the Jews together make up the Shiyi, or the soul. And so how Hmong people like to break it off is, for example, bli can be, and they're minor parts of you. And so bli is just, got the kapong bli, and blis are minji zhongli, I would say like, your skin or your fingernails, just small parts, right? Especially when we look at Zhu, we look at Zhu, Zhu are bigger parts of your body. And so Hmong people bay then Zhu Dei, Zhu Dao, which is your hands, right? Zhu Jian, Zhu Ba, Gan Zhu Jian, Zhu Mo, right? Then we go like Dun Zhu Dua. Zhu Dua is your shadow. And so even your shadow is, we believe it's a fragment it's the reflection of your spirit. And so you Dun Zhu Dua, Dun Zhu Ma, and then Zhu can also go to like Zhu Kai, Zhu Nong, which are, we could say the more animal, or animistic, or the religion, not religion, but our connection to like the natural world. So Zhu Kai, Zhu Nong, Zhu Niu Ga, Niu Gao, all these things, right? These are animals. And all of these then build up together to make, Tu Shiyi, which is the soul, the complete soul itself, which, and there's like a haunting, or, when people die and your loved ones pass on a message to you, we never say, oh, nutun chu lo na, yeah, we say, oh, nutu shu na, we Hmong people think nutu shu, and so it's soul. So that's why people, when you do lose itu play, or when you lose itun chu, you don't die, you just get sick. It's very similar to taking out, like, it's similar to taking out an organ. And although you can survive without that organ or that limb, although you can survive without it, you're going to be very sick without it, right? And so that's by we always want to call. But once your Shiyi leaves you, then Hmong people always relate that to death, because without the soul itself, yeah. And so these are how we break it all down into what is what. And so, when people die, there's many different, and it's because many jas pertain to different parts of the soul, or dunju. And so the last song, to go to the grave, that is for dunju ra. And dunju ra is one of your spirits that is particularly, its role is actually just to watch over your skeleton when it's done. So yeah, that's how you break down the whole anatomy of the spirit and the soul. The symptoms are usually, so I'll break it down first, of like as a you diagnose and let's the symptoms are common. So people will call me and be like, oh, và nè nó biết tụi tụi nó nu nè nó để ta họ thiên tụi nó nu nu chỉ li chỉ xin năng nu trong nó có rõ nó vậy, so they don't seem like that they're themselves, right? They lose their breath themselves, they're weak, they're usually not as strong, they lose interest in what they're into, and then it can be spiritual as well. Then they're like, oh what tụi and I'll ask, hey, nên tụi tú nó nửa món lên non để đi trả lời nó dọ tụi tôi có nói chỉ thế nửa món bây giờ nó thế thì nó trong nó literally whatever, right? So they're like, oh mày tu nó yeah nó tụi nó mua chế sĩ trong nó dọ nó mua chế sĩ trong này nó chơi trong tao lò nữa. So a lot of these hints, then you'll understand, like you have to put the pieces together, because although the symptoms that I named are all common within cái tiếng chú bì bông là cái tiếng chú bì câu na, it's still common in every other one of the categories as well. And so I'll narrow it down. First I'll ask symptoms, and if that is not enough, right? So once, let's say, oh, then I'll automatically know, okay, it's different. And so then I get those symptoms, I link it to the event, or if there is an event, or a timeline of when this started. And the event doesn't have to be something big. It could be something emotional. It can be something, maybe they're in school and they're stressed. A lot of these reasons, because the most common way of is actually emotional stress that you go through in life. And so that's the first things you kind of do. And then come on nang shai na. But the main how you justify it is go nang shai. You look into it, and that's where you and your koneng will come in intuition. And usually your koneng will tell you how it happened, and like, oh no COVID then tu xia la, oh no COVID then I know 2 years ago, vacation, and that happens actually a lot. So
really?
Yeah, that's actually one of those not common, but at least once a year, in a year, once or twice I'll come across. But yeah, so you'll come across these a lot, and that's just how you determine it. And there's like, oh, maybe it's just but sometimes you can fall into like deep spaces where it's hard to get out, and so then this can intensify the ceremony you'll perform. Okay, so one of my told you people always hang on and I did talk might just be placebo, might just be but if I tell you just believe in the experience. And so like when you go into shock, you see something, for example, especially when people pass away, right? When you hear that news, shock, and you hear the Chipong Tower. And sometimes it can just be you're walking, you just have that dread, that boom, that and then you feel like you waver a little bit. These are just small signs, and it's not an episode where it'll overcome you. Sometimes it's not overwhelming, it's very minor, but it lingers, and when you feel that lingering, and that lingering feels like something might, if it feels like something's gonna go bad, that's probably something different. But when it feels like there's something missing, there's a lot more space, then you kind of get it. You're like, oh, okay. But then let's say you did experience, because I always joke around with I'm like, oh, they told me. Nó nói cũng có khó sẽ cũng nên chụp đi để nó một xí lỗ nó so that's the way of always talking about that. And I would, as an average person who let's say you and I, right, you and I are both average people, and có chỉ là nhau thảo nó không như trong tận có chỉ là hai đứa của tia nhân nó nói có khó cũng sẽ bây giờ cuộc sống mua xíu thế, cuộc sống mua xíu lo là thế bây giờ có biết có mấy người trong này rồi tụi con trong nó chỉ ít xe lo hay tiệt, as people you have to recognize ít xe lo tiệt that's the tưởng chụp lấy từ sáng là thế tiệt dark thing or the spirit manipulating them to say that, right? Because maybe their spirit trying to get it through. And also, people, when we also say when like someone's gonna pass away, right, a month before they pass away, then they'll say weird things like they'll just say, oh, Minsai, your monitor like randomly, right? And out of nowhere, and it feels different in your heart. People say, that's how you can identify. That's them doing that. So as normal people, that's what they're low, because that's how average people use to tell signs. But let's look into yourself, right? How do I know you're not feeling yourself, you're not feeling that after a couple of days, and this might be caused from an emotional, physical, any event, or maybe just downtime. Because I want people to understand too that just because people think if I have depression and I'm feeling this way, like but I'm saying, well, maybe that depression did cause. And so if you are going through something like mental health, which can be a very emotional and intense time, do not, I always tell people, just because going through that does not mean. And so recognize that as well. Recognize that mental health is also very spiritual. And that's why I kind of use as well. Just for the small things. Too, if I wanted to know if I should call Kuna, then I would use those. Typically, let's say I do identify it, and I truly feel like it is, right? Let's say I'm pale, and I truly think like and I want to tell someone. And I would say in the Hmong culture, it's so welcoming to these things, right? When you go to your parent, you're like, Mom, oh, so and if you're serious about it, right? They told me, oh, actually, I'm open learning more share babe, learning more share, learning and so I would say when you're in the situation, and you you approach them, but let's say the people where we have to help ourselves, right? I would always say, trust someone who go to someone who you trust, you're comfortable with, and be like, and I would let's say find someone who can hoop me, right? And be like, oh, and I want you to hoop me for me, or you can even ask an elder and like, oh, excuse me, and then so then you'll just let that individual know, because these are all healing ceremonies, and when someone requests someone who please, we will never take it unseriously. So or even a regular person who knows who please, when you come to us and you say you need to please, we'll believe you. And so we do want to help you. And so you just ask them, oh, what do I need? Or if you will you'll just buy you to king them up. You buy you to king, okay, on this day, talk about please. And most times, people do say, if you are sick, you want someone else to talk for you. You don't want you to talk for yourself. But I just, want to put it out there too, is that sometimes you don't have someone who can actually talk for you. So sometimes you do have to do it yourself, and that is okay as well. No humility behind that. But either way, if it's just for you, one person, and if you want to be specific when it comes to gender roles, I don't use this too much, but so you buy yourself, so you get a rooster. If you're a male, you get a female. You get the opposite of you get the opposite gender. But I don't think this matters too much. And then you get one egg and a couple of xia, get a pack of xia, and when the person gets there, they'll probably direct you how much xia they want. But it's very simple. But these healing practices are taken very seriously, and so when someone does feel like this, never be afraid to approach and bring this issue up. For me personally, being a shaman, I know my goals have changed throughout so many years. But I think now I just want to be a holistic healer, honestly. And I want to, I want people to heal, but my goal now is that I want people to learn how to heal themselves as well. And learn how to, have reach out to resources. And, a quote, this is more the OG side of me, but a quote that my elders once said is that, no có khó lo sẽ rồi nó từ lo chỉ hú có là then you're set because có bảo thì lo chỉ mò là lo hú có nó chỉ lo mò nó từ you know I always say yeah món đồ từ cũng chỉ nói năng hú của nó it's not that people aren't you know it's not that people chỉ nhẹ có it's more of lo chỉ mò là nó and so that's like my goal for us to heal collectively and then biggest thing is just be able to pass these traditions down pass these teachings and then talking about you know the overall goal of like being a shaman and you get đa năng này you know nhẹ những hay tiền nhẹ mà nhẹ đa năng nhẹ mà nhẹ chơi năng and so you know như chỉ tới ý but I think you know just putting all the folklore putting all you know the generations of shamans together the things you know the steps we use and I always questioned why you know why do these Qhua come back everyone would say that through that aspera that you know năng cái tu nong sư but I think năng is where it's rising quickly and so you know it's the opposite effect and has it changed in many ways westernized yes has it adapted to other cultures yes but I think the overall goal of Qhua hasn't changed and that's just to bring balance to make sure there's that balance you know a lot of times we say it's to and I say balance just because you know as shamans you know you can fight spirits and so I think it's to bring that balance you know to chia we will tell the chia that you know yes you know to and so because and sometimes we believe that you know when you have that Buddhism mix in there right the system of the thought of nirvana you know you know you're gonna escape rebirth deity or something and so or you just vanish right you're no longer existent you escape life and pain and so I think just the overall goal is to have that balance between spirits and men because you know behu asha as shaman behu asha and so just to make sure that we can not coexist but be aware of each other. I say coexist because we're already coexisting and so we don't need to coexist we just need to live well and respect our boundaries and know how we all balance